Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I hope everyone's had a great day. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar for the new edition of the Human Perspectives ATAR Units 1 to 4 series. My name is Sarah Craig and I'm a senior publisher at Nelson Cengage, and I've had the great pleasure of working on these books for the last couple of years with our fabulous author, Rachel Wan. I'm hosting the session today along with our marketing coordinator, Joanna Monaghan, and our education specialist, Glenn Watson. So today's session will go for about 45 minutes to 1 hour. To ensure we keep to this timeline, can I please ask that if you have questions throughout the session, that you post them in the chat section. You'll see the icon for the chat at the bottom of your screen. We'll try to address the questions throughout the presentation if we can, and we'll also have time to have a chat at the end. You'll see that there's also a Q&A button. I'll ask you not to use that just to make sure we don't miss any questions. Please put them in the chat. That would be great. So I'd now like to introduce our Human Perspectives author and presenter for today, Rachel Wan. Rachel is a highly experienced and passionate science educator. Following her veterinary science and DipEd degrees, Rachel has been teaching science for over 20 years. This has included both human biology and chemistry at years 11 and 12. She was also the head of science for 10 years and is currently the Science Learning Area Coordinator at Holy Cross College. I thank Rachel for joining us today, and I will now hand over to her. Thank you.
So thank you everyone for coming on to the webinar. We're really excited about these new editions of Human Perspectives. So I guess my aim today is that we're going to run through particularly some of the new things that are in the books and just share with you what we've changed, what we've kept as well, and things that you can look forward to in the new editions when they come out. So, I mean, Human Perspectives, as we know, has been around for quite a long time now, and it is acknowledged as a very good textbook and one that's been widely used not only in schools for human biology, but also beyond that as well. So when I was approached to do this and working with Sarah and the other people who have contributed to these new editions, our aim was to identify what was working really well and to make sure we kept that in there, and then look at what areas that we needed to improve to bring it into alignment with the new syllabus and a bit more up to date with some of the advances in science and our knowledge along the way as well. So one of the most important things that we looked at to start with was actually aligning it with the syllabus. So we've made sure that all the syllabus points have actually been covered and really tried to look at covering those in a logical manner. So I guess one of my goals was that if people wanted to, they could pretty much use the textbook to be able to pretty much come up with their program. So they could follow it and be confident to know that they were going to be covering all the content needed, having practice questions there, that it would actually flow in a very logical manner. There were some areas that we also have sort of given the content a bit of greater depth there. This will give teachers a bit more flexibility as well, so that you can use what's there. If you feel that your students maybe aren't up to that, you don't necessarily have to include all of it, but you know that it is there. It is covering the syllabus to the depth that's going to be needed. One way to help you with your program writing and the students as well with their revision and ensuring that they're taking ownership of their learning is that we have included the syllabus points for each chapter at the start of each chapter. So you can use it with planning, the students can use it with their revision, and just also that confidence and peace of mind that we are covering everything that we need to in both year 11 and 12. as I said, the logical flow of the content was really important. I know as a teacher, it's very frustrating when you kind of have to jump around in a textbook, and it's not very useful for the students as well. So when developing the order that we did things in, it was really important to me that it built on previous knowledge and that it all made sense. I think of a little bit like kind of building a story, so that you're not missing things along the way. And like I said, with the idea that you could, if you wanted to, move from start to the end, and it would make sense. So these are just the order of the chapters that we go through. Obviously, Unit 1 being covered first, and then followed by Unit 2, and that logical flow there in the topics as we're covering them along the way. Making sure that the content was updated was another aim that we worked through along the way. So identifying the points that were relevant, that may be some things that have now been outdated in science, but it also could be things that are no longer in the syllabus. So making sure that we identified those areas and removed them where they, if they did come up. We also went and looked at the statistics, examples, and the facts that were included in the textbook and made sure that they had also been updated. So just one example here is with the STIs, looking at slightly more current data than what had previously been available. We all know that having figures and images not only helps our students be more engaged with the text, but it also helps support their learning. So there's a lot of new images, photos, like scanning electron micrographs there, things that actually support their learning, not just in there just to look pretty, but making sure that they are relevant, they help support that understanding, that they complement the text along the way. So we've got the diagrams there, there's photos in there, there's different images along the way for all different types of things, and making sure that they do match with what's actually being covered in that area of the text as well, so that they're complementing one another. The key concept boxes are another important way just to help highlight what are those really key ideas that the student should be picking up along the way. So not necessarily thinking them as a summary, but just that highlighting point there. And a lot of the times they will actually directly match with the syllabus points as well. So highlighting for the students where those connections are actually occurring. So just one example here, obviously with the digestive system, and just summarising the key parts about the chemical digestion and the mechanical digestion, they're happening in the small intestines. We all know how important practice questions are. So one of the new things that we've added is practice questions for each section. So not only at the end of the chapter, but along the way. And our aim with these questions was really for the students to be able to check their understanding of what they've covered so far. So we've broken them down into two types. So the recall knowledge, really looking at them defining, describing, explaining, those basic recall type of questions, but then also having opportunities for them to be able to apply their knowledge of that particular section that they've just covered. So taking it to that slightly higher level. And I mean, we all know now that those practice questions are so important for them to check their understanding, for them to be able to try and to transfer that information into their long-term memory and build on everything that they've actually learned. So this is, so obviously from chapter 15, so just an example of the range of questions that are covered. So we've got some there that are some very straightforward ones, just simple recall from what they've been reading. Some asking them to have a little bit more information in there. Looking at the difference between things, so they've actually got to incorporate and synthesize information there. And then looking at the apply knowledge ones, where they actually have to explain it. So actually supporting their answers, applying it to different situations, and then also using it, so where they've got to classify them and sort of not only answer the question, but they've got to understand terms. So for example, if they're understanding whether it's a genotype or phenotype, so they've actually got to apply that in their answer as well. Alongside that, we've still kept the review questions at the end of the chapter. So these ones we've broken up into 4 different sections. So our recall, explain, apply and extend, really to make sure that the students have gained what they needed to out of that particular chapter, that they have met the requirements of those syllabus points that we were aiming to cover in that chapter, and that they've got that practice in actually being able to retrieve that information and use it. So these ones, I guess, take things to that little bit of a higher level, in that they've got a greater volume of content to actually cover in those questions. So this is just one example here, looking at some of the different questions. That's probably a little bit small, but hopefully you can get the idea there. So once again, we've got our sort of our low level, our C standard type questions. We're describing them, asking them to draw a labeled diagram, listing functions, excuse me, before they then go on to slightly higher level questions, where they're, in this case, asking them to look at the difference between things, explain how it is able to do something, the role of them. It's also, this section is where we can often brought in some of the questions where they might have to interpret a little bit of data. So in this one here, we've got interpreting some information of the nucleotides, and so they've got to actually use that. So they've got to interpret the data plus also use what they've learned to be able to actually understand the importance of that. The extend ones have a bit more variety. So some of them are actually giving students opportunity to go and do some research about some areas that possibly beyond the straight syllabus points, but obviously are still very relevant to the topic there. But also giving them that opportunity to see how these syllabus points apply in a broader sense as well. So a bit of opportunities there for extending and taking the content that little bit further as well. The chapter activities. So we have a range of activities that support the learning. Some of them you will be familiar with because, as we said, there's a lot of really good work in the previous editions that we, and those that were relevant and up to date were definitely kept in there. So we've got activities including investigations, some research tasks, modelling things, and we've some practicals and dissections, as well as the data analysis type questions. The this is an area where it really allows the students to develop and use their science inquiry skills, not only in the investigations, but also in that data analysis section as well. And I'm sure that it's quite common in many schools that those investigation skills aren't always the strengths of the students. So it's really important that they have as much practice of that in as many different situations that they can. So this is just one example of an activity where they're looking at where it's going to actually be applicable to, and then they're using some skills that they've learned in the chapter and then applying that to a family with Huntington's disease. We've got also investigations, so a wide range. Some of them are new ones that have been developed by Southern Biological, that Sarah will talk a bit more about in a little bit. But those actual practical investigations where they can be very hands-on, some are more directed than others. Some are more open where they can actually plan their method as well as conducting and analysing them. Another new addition that we've included in this edition is the summaries and glossaries at the end of each chapter. So the summaries really designed to review those key points, to help the students really reflect on what were those key things that they should have got out of the chapter. And then the glossary, having the glossary specific for just that particular chapter, hopefully will help the students really focus on those key terms that they need for that chapter, rather than only looking up the term here or there that they might not, might not know. So really hoping that they'll use that to develop an understanding of the terminology for all those key terms in the chapter. So just an example here of the first little bit of the glossary for chapter 15, setting it out using the different colours, obviously making it very easy for the students to find their terms. And I'm sure you realise that the bit they've cut off is with the rest of them, so they are all in alphabetical order there. And then the summary, once again, making sure that it's clearly identifying that all of those points are covering the syllabus points that we're needing to cover for that particular chapter. Having them in dot points, very easy to follow, and in a logical way that follows the flow of the text in the actual chapter. And also while still using the correct terminology, but having them in an easily interpretable manner. So particularly those students who struggle a little bit with literacy, hopefully the summaries will help support their understanding of what they've actually learnt in that chapter. The whole book is supported by a whole range of different resources as well. And obviously they're all there to support the students' learning. So we've got web links in there to actually specific websites that we've actually gone and looked at and checked for their relevance, made sure they're still working, and put the web link icons in places that the students can very easily identify that there are certain places that they could go to for additional information or additional practice, possible simulations in some cases as well. We've got worksheets that support each of the chapters, and where they're relevant has also been identified with these icons, as well as icons showing where there's an activity that's related to a certain section of that text as well. So easy to see for the students, but also for the teachers to identify that as well along the way. And I'll hand over to Sarah now, and she'll talk to you more about the partnership that we've got with
Great. Thanks so much, Rachel. Thank you for running through the book features. I hope it's given everyone a little bit of a taster of the new things that are included. If you haven't had a look at the page proofs yet, we really encourage you to do so. You know, they really look fantastic, and the sheer amount of work and time and effort that Rachel has put into it has been really remarkable. So in terms of the partnership, Southern Biological, it may be a familiar name to many of you, it may not. They are a hands-on Australian science education company. They've been around for about 40 years supporting science educators. So they provide a range of curriculum-aligned resources, primarily investigations. They also run PD workshops, student workshops, and they sell all the products that you need to carry out investigations. So whether you get your supplies from Southern Biological or not, doesn't matter, but they have provided some really fantastic new investigations for the Human Perspective series. So there are 9 in the Units 1 and 2 book, and each one is supported by some really great online resources as well. So they have filmed video demonstrations of each investigation, and that includes a lab prep video. So, you know, all the preparation of chemicals and materials and so on that either the teacher or the lab tech will prepare before the investigation is carried out. And then also a video of the student method. So the complete method from start to finish, including the results. So we'll house those videos on the teacher website because it has the results in there. We don't want students getting access to them before they've carried out the investigation themselves. And they will also be accompanied by lab advice and safety sheets, which can also be found on the Nelsonnet website. So they are exclusive to Cengage. So, you know, you'll be you know, the lucky recipients of those investigations, and they've been very rigorously stress tested to make sure that they will work in the classroom. Rachel, if you can just skip to the next slide. So here's an example of one of them from chapter 2. It's investigating surface area and volume of cells using agar cubes. So that's just a snapshot of the pages. So same format or very similar format to the rest of the investigations. And then if you just skip forward to the next one, this is a couple of screenshots of the videos I was talking about for that same investigation. So we can see that there's a lab prep, then it runs through the student method, and then we've got the results as well. So hopefully they'll be a really, really useful resource for you. They've also filmed videos for 4 other investigations in the book. There's the 3 dissections. So there's the kidney, the heart, and the rat, which, you know, that was confronting for me to watch as a non-biology teacher, but I'm sure, you know, they'll be very, very useful. So if you just skip to the next one. So in terms of other resources, you know, we are providing a lot of digital support with these new editions. So there will be answers to all of the student book chapter questions, activities, and the review questions. So every question or activity you see in the book has a corresponding answer. They've been written by a practicing teacher, Charlotte Donovan. She's done an absolutely amazing job. Has also, you know, contributed as a reviewer to the textbook along with Michelle Morton. So we really thank them for their experience. We've got practice tests via Cogniro Assess, and I'll go into these a little bit further in a moment. And we've got chapter PowerPoint, so like a summary PowerPoint for every chapter, the videos, which I've just talked about, and the lab advice and safety sheets, which are for the investigations. We've got teaching plans, so that cover every chapter throughout the books and map them to the syllabus. Also a separate syllabus mapping, and the worksheets and web links that Rachel mentioned as well. So they will all be available on the Nelsonnet resource sites, as well as, of course, the ebook versions as well. So just next slide, please. Thank you. So the practice tests are a really exciting new addition. So they are being housed in our assessment platform, which is called Cogniro Assess. You just access it from your NelsonNet teacher website, so you don't need an extra account or anything like that. So we've done a practice test for every chapter except for chapter 1, because that's like an introductory chapter. And they are written and presented in the style of the WACE exam. So they include multiple choice, short answer and extended answer questions. And they've been written by a very experienced human biology teacher and WACE marker, Derek Kumpstein. He's done a fabulous job of those. So they are provided on Cogniro Assess, which is a really flexible tool for you to use. So you can go in there, have a look at all the different questions that are arranged in tests. You can decide that you want to use that test as it is, or you can edit or modify questions. You can add your own questions. You can move them around. You know, if you want to make a big sort of end of term test, you have the power to do that. And then you assign it to your students. They can either, you know, you can send them the link and they can come and complete the test online, or you can convert it, you can output it as a Word document or a PDF document and so on. Answers are provided for all questions. So the multiple choice is responsive, so it will self-mark, and there are marking keys supplied for all of the short and extended answer questions as well. And as a teacher, you can jump into the platform and you can mark students' responses yourself. You can view the results, individual results, class results. You get a lot of data and analysis around that, which is great. Rachel, is there anything you wanted to add about the practice tests? Oh, sorry, you're just on mute there.
Mute. I guess one of the good thing about having a test for each chapter is it gives the teachers that flexibility of how they're structuring their test or their assessment outline, and still having a range of questions that they can choose from that they know are going to be too standard and are going to help prepare the students to the best of the levels that they can. So even though they are per chapter, if their test is going to be for a couple of chapters, they can still combine them and get a good balance there. So I think it's, I know I'm really excited to be able to use it. I think it will give them ease a bit of workload, which is always a good thing, but also give flexibility there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If we just flick to the next slide, and I think we'll hand over to Glenn now. Glenn, if you'd just like to unmute yourself, and you can chat a bit further about how teachers can get access to all these excellent resources.
Thank you, Sarah. For those that don't know me, my name's Glenn Watson. I look after everything north of the city up to Kununurra and east out to Kalgoorlie. And my colleague Donna looks after everything from south of the river down to Esperance. And we'll give you our contact details in a minute. A lot of you will already have NelsonNet accounts. Well, I hope you do. If you don't, you're using the current edition, you can contact us and we'll tell you how to do it. But when the new edition is available, the teacher's website is up and running at the same time. So as soon as you see the book, that means you can log on and request access to the new version. Okay, so next slide, please, Sarah. Okay, so once you're actually in NelsonNet, if you have an account already, if you look up the top, there's a little button that says request access. So if you click on that, search for the title, click on the right title, and then across on the other side, it will say adoption quantity. That simply means the number of students that you're expecting to be in that class. You won't get 37 pieces of paper and you won't get charged for it. You need to put in your bookseller's name, and then across the other side, you just click request. It comes to us, we okay it, and then IT will add it to your bookshelf. Next slide, please, Sarah. Okay, now there are a couple of pricing options that are available with the book. Most of you prefer the book with the free ebook, and that's $82.95. Now we expect book 1 to be available towards the end of next month, hopefully. And the access, and you can also buy it as an access code only. which is $49.95. So there is a fair saving there. And that should be available around the same time. The Year 12 book, we've got some good news. We've been able to bring that back. So that will be now available about the middle of December. I know that some of you would have gone by then, but we will have fairly shortly page proofs of the book 1 and 2. I'm hoping to have those next week. So if you haven't asked me for a set already, please send me an email and we will organise to get you one in the next week. And I think we're looking at book 3, 4 in about 2 weeks. We'll have our pages in a format where we'll be able to get them printed and bound for page proofs. So somebody asked a question earlier on about what are we doing with the early starters for Year 12. What we will be doing is supplying the first 3 chapters of the book in electronic format. So all you'll need to do is confirm with me or Donna how many students you have, what supplier you are using, send us an email and we'll organise the electronic pages to come to you to distribute to your students. Next, I think that's all of my slides. Oh, the last one, there you go. There's our contact details there. So if anyone has any questions, they can do that via the chat now and we'll try and answer them for you. Over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. So apologies, earlier when I was replying to your messages, I realised that they weren't going through properly. So hopefully Joanna has copied most of my responses now. So there were a lot of questions about answers, which, as I've said, are supplied on the teacher resource site for all the questions in the book and the activities and the practice tests. Glenn has now covered dates. Certainly this session has been recorded and will be sent out quite soon, so you can feel free to share it with other people in your school, or if you want to live the experience again, then you can. And if you'd like to see more of how Cogniro works, please do set up a time with Glenn. You know, just shoot him an email and he'll set up a time to run through it with you. You know, you may have used ExamView with Human Perspectives or other products in the past, and this is quite different. It's much more user-friendly and much more powerful. So, you know, we really do encourage you to engage with these resources, and I know Glenn will be very happy to run through it with you. We've had a question, is it possible to have the chapter that we start with? So, look, just speak to Glenn about what chapters you need and he'll be very happy to supply them. You know, whether it's immunity or whatever chapter you plan to start with. So yeah, please do get in touch with Glenn and we'll be very happy to help you out. There's been a question about, and Glenn, you may be able to help with this one, smaller groups for access to NelsonNet, for example, country, lower socioeconomic schools.
Sure. When you go to NelsonNet, when you go to put in your adoption quantity, if you put in less than 10, it automatically rejects it because there has to be a default score. So if you've got 5 students in your class, just put in 10 and we'll pick it up at this end and that'll be fine. You might even have 1 or 2 or the kids are doing it through site or whatever. That's still not a problem. You just need to flick me a quick note and say, Glenn, I've sent through a request and this is how many numbers we actually have, but make sure you put in 10, otherwise it's just going to sit there and won't go anywhere. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. So yeah, if you just log into your NelsonNet account and just go through that request the title process, then that will all work out fine. There was a question about, can the tests be downloaded and printed? Yeah, absolutely. So if you don't want students to take the test digitally, then you can choose to export that as a PDF or a Word document and print it out for your kids and do it the paper way. That's not a problem at all. How have the science as a human endeavour points been addressed in the new textbook? Rachel, that might be one you'd like to cover. Are they explicitly covered in the content or more in the investigation activities?
I'm just trying to think of specific examples, but they have been treated as equally important as all the science understanding. So they will have all been covered in the actual chapters themselves. Yeah. So
yes,
but they've just been left as extras for the kids to go and research. They have actually been covered within the text, the content of the text themselves.
Yeah, that's right. And with the science inquiry skills, they are obviously covered through the investigations and the activities, but they're also introduced and explained in chapter 1, which is more of a generalist, human biology, the scientific method and so on is covered in chapter 1. Has the microscopy section been expanded? Rachel, can you speak to that point? Or do we need some clarification?
I guess I was trying to interpret the question, but I'm just not 100% sure which exact area linking to, whether it's the microscopes themselves or more, whether looking at the microscopic structure of things. But both of those situations, we've made sure that they have been expanded to be able to cover the syllabus points to the depth that the students do need to have to be able to understand and apply that situation. As far as actually using the microscopes go, that is within the activities in there. So there's an activity where it's actually teaching them how to use the microscope, and then that activity is actually referred to in some of the activities later on, referring them back to that original one to make sure their skills in using the microscopes are up to the standard that they need as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a question about whether the chapters on hominins and cultural evolution have been updated. Yes, absolutely, they have. All chapters have been updated in various ways, but that's certainly one of them that had, quite an extensive update. And if you haven't looked at a sample chapter or had a look at page proofs, I do encourage you to get into contact with Glenn so, you can see all this for yourself as well. I think that will be really useful for you. Does it include calculations on field of view and cell size?
Yes, there are some of those in there, yes.
Yeah. Reliability, validity and accuracy, yes, is also covered. Stages of pregnancy, is it still in the book?
The stages, yes, and particularly in terms of the developmental side of it, but focusing more on the fetus itself.
Yeah, that section has changed quite a lot, and there used to be quite a lengthy section, I think, about like post-birth development, and that's no longer in the syllabus, if I'm remembering correctly. So there's a question around whether students will have access to Cogniro. Yes, absolutely. So they access it a slightly different way. You have to, once you've developed your test and you're ready for students to complete it, then you basically invite them into the Cogniro platform. There's a number of different ways of doing that. You can input their emails manually, you can import their details from a spreadsheet, you can send them a link, and again, Glenn can run through sort of the nuts and bolts of how Cogniro works. And then students can just easily sign in and complete the test online. And then they can also see that data and analytics around their results and, get a really good tracking of how they're doing as well. So I hope we've covered the questions that have come through so far. If not, do get in contact with Glenn or Donna, and they will, if they can't answer it themselves, then they'll get in touch with me or Rachel, and we'll do our best to get you the information that you need. So I'll take this opportunity to thank Rachel for her presentation and for just sharing that information with us. I hope it was really useful for everyone. Thanks to Glenn. And thank you, all of you, for joining, for taking the time out of your afternoon. I hope it's, given you a good insight of what to expect with the new editions, and that you really enjoy using them when they come out later in the year. So I'll just quickly throw over to Joanna.
Hi everyone. So within the next 7 days, you will receive an email from us which will have a certificate of completion in it. So showing that you completed today's webinar, and we have recorded the session, and we will email the recording out to everyone within the next 2 weeks. So keep an eye on your inbox. And just in regards to receiving your free copy of the text, that will be mailed out to you upon publication to the mailing address that you provided on the registration form when you registered for today's webinar. So if for whatever reason your mailing address has changed, or you're not sure if you put in the right one, please email us as soon as you can so we can fix that up for you. But yeah, thank you everyone for attending. We hope you enjoyed the webinar.
Great, thanks everyone. Have a good night.